Senators, when the House last rose, we were debating the Constitution of St. Lucia bill, amendment bill. Senator Antoine Prosper.
Madam President, it's a bit difficult to speak when you have just had lunch. And when you have had such prolific contributions earlier during the day, sometimes you wonder what else is there to say. Madam President, let me join my colleagues in recognizing the passing of former independent Senator Henry Phillips. I wish to extend condolences to family and friends, and to congratulate Ms. Julian Alfred, who continues to make St. Lucia proud. We should never forget, Madam President, that before Julian Alfred was so famous, one of our ministers was assisting her with simple items that she needed, and our country spent a lot of money trying to prosecute him for doing that. But today we are all proud of Julian Alfred, and a lot of other people are trying to get credit for her accomplishments. But that's for another show. Madam President, I was only 12 years old when St. Lucia became independent. And I can remember how happy I was as I joined other St. Lucians in celebrating independence. Madam President, I share that same feeling today. And I am very delighted to be part of history. And when I look around at what some people are doing, I'm wondering whether they really appreciate or whether they really understand the issue at the moment, whether they really understand that we have created history in St. Lucia. I wonder whether they really understand that it's difficult to get a 2/3 majority, and probably this is why they are not happy, because they may have another 20 years and may never be able to get a simple majority. Madam President, we have struggled for a good education since our country attained self-governance after colonization for so many decades. This bill, Madam President, Constitution of St. Lucia Amendment Act, is a bill that liberates us. It amends the Constitution of St. Lucia, Cap 1.01, the Act, to modify provisions that allow for appeals to Her Majesty in Council and to provide for appeals to the Caribbean Court of Justice. Madam President, Jodia, moi Joute, Moi, je parce que moi, ouais, aujourd'hui, ça c'est un jour en l'histoire, cette Lucie. Avec Issa, mon chay, mon poko comprendre l'histoire faite cette Lucie. En disant, Kaï Parlement m'a dit. Et puis moi, je vais danser, je vais faire toute couilloté et koyo, toute papichou et koyo. Parce que je ne peux pas comprendre qui ça qui fait là. Madam President, I would have expected the people on the opposition to understand that it is a step in the right direction for St. Lucia. And colleagues before me have explained this. After 44 years of political independence, my question is, Madam President, do we need a referendum to instruct us that we needed to emancipate ourselves from the Privy Council? Do we need a referendum? And my colleagues have to explain what a referendum is. A referendum, c'est quoi? Moi, une question, et moun ka voter oui et ben non pour question. Avec qui sam opposition te vle nous aller demander moun oui et ben non. Avec yo ka aller à terre et puis poisonner l'idée ces moun pour empêcher yo ka chiller. Nous ka faire un bagay qui bon pour pays nous. Nous aller indépendants et puis nous ka continuer. Pour qui nous sommes indépendants et que nous still pour aller l'Angleterre pour frapper justice pour cas de les bagages qui s'est passé qui ne sont pas satisfaits, ils te joignent un beau jugement en côte Sainte-Lucie, à l'audience Sainte-Lucie. Avec nous n'y pour catcher bien. Les nous voulons couiller les gens pour nous faire qu'on nous garde bon. Et puis c'est ça, Madame Président, moi aujourd'hui. Il y a des gens en opposition qui veulent faire garder bon. Et puis ils ont joué en l'idée les sept ici pour supporter en papi choix. Ils ont fait. Madam President, it is rather unfortunate that people opposite who are appointed or elected and being paid to represent the people of St. Lucia in this August House have shown disrespect to the people of St. Lucia by absenting themselves from the debate. Moi, Madame Président, je te pour servir l'occasion ça là pour éduquer Saint-Lucien, pour faire savoir qui ça nous ca faire. Yo pas quand même dire c'est moun qui ça qui un référendum. Yo pas quand même dire c'est moun qui ça nous ca essayer faire parce que si moun ka suivre, vous supposez indiquer moun et vous pas supposé mislead moun, Madame Président. Moi toi paix ça disrespectful. Moi toi paix yo ja dérespecter Jean Saint-Lucie avec ça yo ka faire. You see, Madam President, we have a culture where it is easier to criticize people than to applaud them for the good that they have done. And I believe this is what we are facing today, that this government has moved in the right direction. We have done something good by amending the Constitution to facilitate swifter justice, to facilitate those people among us. In fact, not those people among us, majority of St. Lucians. Madame Président, je sais plus si panical tel l'argent ou brisé pour aller en Privy Council sous pas satisfait et puis décision High Court Saint-Lucie. Conseil, on chaque monde ka aller conseil avec yo pas content décision. Mais là ni on l'autre level où ça aller pour taper justice. Là où dit moi, Madame Président, il a coûté au monde 1200 pounds pour commencer, juste pour commencer process là en Privy Council là. Et puis il peut coûter pas moins que 130 000 dollars pour coûter pour payer pour question en Privy Council là. Et quand nous a dit avant, c'est pas ça tout seul on peut payer plein pour aller en Angleterre, on peut acheter côté pour rester, on est pour manger, on est pour prendre machine pour monter descendre l'audience. De là où pas have quantité de temps et qu'il point. Et ça c'est un chai l'argent. On chai Saint-Lucien pas ça à faute. Moi même pas ça à faute pour être Privy Council. Mais si là une pièce l'autre mon bordage au table là qui n'y calcule l'argent ça pour être dépensé en Privy Council. Comme ça moi ka question un bagage qui bon nous ka faire avec parce que son l'autre gouvernement qui ka fait moun pa vle, moun sav, ça c'est un bail qui bon. Madam President, how long should we remain in bondage, servitude, to England? For how long? It is 44 years of independence. And we still want to think that everything from England is better than what we have in the Caribbean, what we have in St. Lucia. Madam President, who wants to tell us that the minds of British lords and judges are more brilliant than ours? And they are more logical thinkers. They are more meticulous with their decisions or more systematic in decision making than our sons and daughters of the Caribbean. Madam President, I think we have endured this for too long, and I am very elated that the day has come, that the moment has come, that the liberation has come, that the realization that we can depend on ourselves to conduct our court cases in the Caribbean, and we do not have to fly thousands of miles to get a decision. Madam President, we on this side can no longer suffer from colonial inferiority. That is a colonial mentality, an internalized attitude of ethnic or cultural inferiority felt by people as a result of colonization, sorry. That is Alan's word, I don't want to say it much. It corresponds with the belief that the cultural values of the colonizer are inherently superior to ours. And this causes us to self-doubt and to mistrust everyone around us. So now we are hearing that there will be political interference, that this person knows that one, so there will not be fair judgment. But Madam President, don't we have court cases in St. Lucia all the time? I think we can talk about the length of time that it takes for a hearing. We can talk about the backlog of cases. We can talk about all those people who are in remand at Bodile. But I don't think we can really speak about not getting justice. I don't hear that around very much. So why is it that if we have the highest court in the Caribbean that the rulings will be so much different that people are worried that they will not get justice. So in other words, we are saying that the laws and the magistrates, whoever they are from England, are more trustworthy. They are more brilliant than us, and they will hand down better judgment. I don't think that's how it works. And when people tell you that colonialism had a conscience, then you understand the behavior that they exhibit out there, Madam President. The Caribbean has produced brilliant sons and daughters who are well-rounded, who are very highly regarded academics, legal and judicial experts, who are now judges on the Caribbean Court of Justice. Our very own, as you have heard before, Dr. Kennedy Anthony signed the agreement establishing the Caribbean Court of Justice 22 years ago. So we are way behind. This should have been done a long time ago. And as you heard previously, we have paid the fees and we have not been using the services of the CCJ. It would seem that some of our people are not aware of that. And this is what those on the opposite side should be educating the St. Lucian populace about, instead of distracting the people, Madam President. And this is very difficult for me to understand. Why do we have people who are paid, people who are supposed to be of service to the country, people who are supposed to be seated here representing the people of St. Lucia, and they are out there keeping noise. They are out there keeping distraction. Madam President, as I said before, there is an argument of trust and political interference. You know, people always judge you according to their own standards. I think what they are telling us, Madam President, si c'était nous, c'est ça nous te kay fait. But we know that the judges are honest, and instead of criticizing what we should be doing is to see how well we can work with the CCJ to ensure that we enhance the institution. If there are issues that we have, they should be addressed so that we can address them, and not sit there and talk about what is not being done, what should be done, and I don't trust, because it appears that after more than 500 years of emancipation, we still have some people who have not liberated themselves from mental slavery, as Bob Marley would have said. And so they are still pessimistic about everything around them. Instead of looking at the good, they look at what is bad. And this is what is really happening out there, Madam President. Madam President, this amendment to our Constitution is another step towards political independence. We have been able to take care of our own affairs, our external, our internal affairs, as I would have told my students. But there are other things. We still refer to Her Majesty, the Queen, even in this house. And now it's the King. When are we going to say, I can say Madam President in the Senate, but I need to be able to refer to my head of state as Mr. President or our President. So we still have, as Senator Lee said earlier, it is a process. And this is why I'm saying, Madam President, that we should be jubilant and not looking for excuses not to be. Because this is a further step. And remember earlier I said, at 12 years, I couldn't really appreciate independence, but I was happy. Now that I can understand what the ascension to the CCJ is, and why we should retire the Privy Council, I have reason to be happy, and I have reason to be part of history. Madam President, we are not doing this for ourselves. We are doing it for the country. We are doing it for the generations to come. We cannot continue, after Great Britain has taken all our resources, we cannot continue pouring money into England to listen to court cases. We cannot continue to be a colony. We are supposed to be an independent nation, a sovereign nation. And so we should have the right to choose whether we want to stay with the Privy Council or move to the CCJ. And this is exactly what a man, a visionary, has done. Honorable Philip J. Pierre realized that, and this is a man who is concerned about the people. And he tells you he's a government for the people. And he tries to do everything for the people, especially the more marginalized people. So the more elite, they know that they can pay the exorbitant amounts to the Privy Council, so they don't care about the little people. They are not concerned about the little people, Madam President, because they'll be able to pay their fees. And today I heard that they are saying that certain people may not want to go to the Privy Council. This is why the government quickly instituted the CCJ. Because it seems it's a competition to see who can spend the money. So if you don't have it, you cannot go to the Privy Council. But, Madam President, we have to think of the ordinary person who lives in St. Lucia. The ordinary person who cannot afford the cost of going to the Privy Council. Madam President, we have to understand that not everybody can go to England. Not everybody. In fact, we have to understand that very few people from St. Lucia can go to England to hear their case. And so, when we have a regional court that can make use of the technology and meet us at home to listen to our cases, when we have a regional court, Madam President, that will take a much shorter time to issue a verdict on a case. It is to the advantage of the more vulnerable. It is to the advantage of those who would not have got that opportunity otherwise. And it reminds me, Madam President, of the conviction of the Honorable Prime Minister that we will be able to give one child per household a university education, because we are looking at empowering the people of our country. So we are empowering them by working towards giving every child, every household, one university graduate. And we are targeting those households where there's nobody who has a university degree. And a lot of young people are coming forward. We probably didn't realize the magnitude of the problem. But we are seeing so many young people who are saying, yes, now, at last, finally, I can go to university. Because we have brilliant children who simply need an opportunity. Similarly, Madam President, we have many people in St. Lucia who could get a better verdict for their cases. But because there is a barrier, a financial barrier, Madam President, they are not able to find justice. And this is why, this is what this is all about. Madam President, c'est ça nous qu'a parlé about Jordia. Nous voulons n'importe moun qui Saint-Lucie, qui n'y a case, qui c'est yo ka perd, qui c'est un moun qui yo ka chile qui fait yo un bagay qui pas juste avec yo pas satisfait, yo j'arrivé dernier degré côté yo sa joine justice. Nous voulons ces moun ça là, ça afford. Nous pas voulons c'est l'argent qui a empêché moun Saint-Lucie joine justice, Madame Président. Nous voulons tout le monde Saint-Lucie a une opportunité ça là. Même quand nous voulons tout jeune gens Saint-Lucie a une opportunité pour éducation. Comme ça, aujourd'hui, ça pour bail papi chaud qui aller là, Madame Président. Ça pas bêtise nous va faire là. Ça c'est bail un bagage qui bien sérieux. Avec moi des cas espérer. C'est leader qui l'autre side là pour te prendre ça bien sérieux. Mais il semble ça sous papi chaud yoye. Avec moi pas quoi. Jean Saint-Lucie supposé voter by moun qui a sous papi chaud. Ou supposé voter by moun qui souye. By moun qui kay point l'enterrer ou. Parce que ça c'est un bagay qui en l'enterrer tout Jean Saint-Lucie. Ça c'est un bagay qui kay aider. Pas Jean Saint-Lucie tout seul, Jean Caraïbe là. Avec nous une opportunité, on chaque pays Caraïbe là pour joindre. Yo kadou qui manière l'audience c'est Trinidad avec yo pourquoi ça font changer constitution yo. Mais nous ni pour comprendre ou briser what is too food? Ou briser 3 cas majorité à Kaila pour ça faire une décision comme ça. Et puis on chaque ces pays ça là pour qu'on ait une élection côté yon ni 3 cas majorité. So qui manière ça fait ça cette ici qu'a fait actuellement. Raison qui fait gouvernement ça là ça fait ça. C'est parce que il n'y plus passé 3 fois majorité à Kaï Concept. Comme ça nous pas briser so l'Acadie nous pas briser un référendum. Bagay la yo ka di se mouna pa ni CCJ si pa ni référendum là. Moi vle yo gagner et pour yo changer pièce loi Saint-Lucie. Parce que yo pa kay jamais joindre 3 cas majorité en kay concite ça Saint-Lucie. Madame Président, là nous dit Jean Saint-Lucie a une plus grande opportunité pour accès fair justice. Nous parlons pour justice. Privy Council a trop plus cher passer CCJ. Ça c'est yon l'avantage. Deuxième l'avantage, c'est quand t'es temps et qu'il y a point pour jeune justice soit aller l'Angleterre. Avec CCJ, yo ça fait ça plus aisé, plus vite, avec à servir technologie nous nia. Madam President, justice from the Privy Council was beyond the reach of majority of our people because it is too expensive. The CCJ model electronic case filing and management, and they are second to none, Madam President. And they started long before COVID in facilitating quicker and better access to justice. Madam President, a lot has been said this afternoon. On chaija di après-midi, mais moi kachile, moi tenu pour expliquer ça en langage créole. Pour chaque Jean Saint-Lucie qui est assise et qui a écouté, avec peut-être déjà on chaque bagay qui pas vrai. Moi te vle yo savent, ça c'est un bon bagay. Ça c'est peut-être premier bagay là qui j'arrivé Saint-Lucie après indépendant 44 years ago, 44 l'année qui passé. Avec il est difficile pour changer loi, les lois déjà établies. Avec ça c'est un bagay gouvernement ça là j'ai achivé. Et moi ça pas seul bagay là nous ka achivé, c'est comme on a dou pas tant faire chaud. Batli. Eh ben nous ka battre faire pas tant chaud. Nous ka assurer qui nous mène Saint-Lucie pour full independence avant gouvernement ça là sorti en power. Madam President, I wish to commend the Prime Minister, Honorable Philip J. Pierre, for this vision and for this bold move. Ce n'est pas n'importe qui a prendre qualité move ça, Madame Président. On suppose son homme. Et qu'on suppose son homme qui debout, un homme et bonne femme qui debout bien fort en les dépieds. Et avec pour tous ces gens qui te ka parler. Puis si ouais un petit homme noir, yo habitué c'est Prime Minister blanc. So sous pas blanc ou pas un cervelle, sous pas blanc ou pas intelligent, et ben actuellement yo ouais un petit boy qui te levé marchand. C'est premier Prime Minister Saint-Lucie Hani. Et on dit ça sans péril. Madam President, in closing, let me wish all St. Lucians well. Let me wish everyone who may have an issue that they would not have been able to take to the Privy Council, that they would now have the freedom to take it to the CCJ and find justice. Madam President, I thank you.
Senator Joha here.
Thank you, Madam President, and I just want to wish my colleague senators a good afternoon. Madam President, I certainly want to beg leave of you before I go into my contribution on the matter before us to express sincere condolences on behalf of my colleague senators and the St. Lucia Labour Party to the family and staff of Choice Television. We lost Mr. Wayne Whitfield, a very renowned media professional, and the celebration for his life will be held at the Cathedral tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. for anyone who would be interested in attending. Also, and not just because it is International Women's Day, well, we are in the month celebrating International Women's Day, which is next Wednesday, I want to lend my voice to congratulate Ms. Julian Alfred on the remarkable role she has played in displaying our flag and representing our country in the United States. At this point, Julian holds records that persons older than her do not hold. And so at this point, she has the fastest, well, she's the youngest person to have the fastest record at the collegiate level. So congratulations to Miss Julian Alfred. I know our previous administration under, well, our current Minister for Education, when he was Minister with responsibility for youth and sports at the time, did his best to try to assist her. And my colleague, Senator Dr. Antoine, did allude to that earlier. The opposition removed that support to Miss Alfred. And for those who were paying attention to Yadi and Jaim a few days ago, to Atine, if you might permit me, Madam President, who is Julian's coach, specifically called out the leader of the opposition, reminding him that at the time when Julian Alfred needed $80 as a stipend, his administration said no to her. Now, Madam President, I bring this because it certainly boils down to the essence of our debate. Why not the CCG? Is it because we have a problem with our identity? We have a problem with our people? And so part of my contribution will allow for us to really look deep within to make an assessment of who we are as a people, where we came from and where we are going. Now, Madam President, this matter for the CCJ, and I do not want to weary the patience of the saints because a lot has been said about the structure of the CCJ. I want to really thank Senator Lee for giving us that lesson today, which really gave us more insight on why it is so important for us at this time to join the CCJ. And for Senator Jacques, who gave us several analogies that can really hit home as to why it is important for us to do this. Now, I listened intently to the debate on Tuesday when this amendment was passed before the lower house, and particularly to the presentation made by the member for Beaufort South, former Prime Minister Dr. Kennedy Anthony, as he laid the foundation of where this all started. Because, Madam President, with the opposition coming into the media now, one would think that this CCJ thing just started. But way back, 22 years ago, Dr. Anthony in 2001 signed, along with other CARICOM countries, for St. Lucia to accede to the CCJ. The CCJ is now 18 years old. This conversation from since 22 years ago to the CCJ being formed 18 years ago, it is not new. Administration after administration has been aware of St. Lucia's desire to accede. But this SLP administration, with the 3/4 majority, has decided to continue with the business of the people. Particularly when the Prime Minister, Honorable Philip J. Pierre, made reference to this in his debate, in his budget debate in 2022, saying that it is his desire for St. Lucia to accede to the CCJ, and he made an allocation for that. Now, Madam President, even when the St. Lucia Labour Party campaigned way before the election, and in its manifesto, I will also reiterate what colleague senators before me have said on page 28, to return our country to a system that respects our democratic norms and the rights of our people, a St. Lucia Labour Party government will, number 4, commence the process for the ascension to the Caribbean Court of Justice as St. Lucia's final appellate court as the replacement to the Privy Council. This was since before the SLP came into office in 2021. The leader of the opposition had nothing to say then. But before the election, Madam President, and if you will beg leave of me just for a few, I can also make this a document for all members to have access to. I want to refer to an article by St. Lucia Star. And this was in 2020, again before the general election. And the title of this article, it's just about 2 minutes long. Will CCJ hopes of Bar Association President join forgotten recommendations? And it says that last week's issue of the Star, Miss Renee St. Rose, according to the article, who was the president of the Bar Association at the time, a practicing attorney, identified among her goals that St. Lucia move from the Privy Council to the Caribbean Court of Justice as the final court of appeal, pinpointing the financial aspect of the Privy Council as well as the distance involved. She considers it important that this nation makes the change. St. Lucia's Court of Appeal, she said, determines hundreds of cases a year, yet only a fraction end up at the Privy Council. And I was very surprised when I heard Leader of Government Business said that the average cost is about $130,000. Madam President, if I might just briefly segue, in a year, I do not even make $130,000. But I will come to that because it will draw home the point of our St. Lucians not being able to afford to go to the CCJ. So the article continues, as to the fear that the CCJ's judges can be influenced by politics, she insists that the organization is independent. Now, Dominica, Guyana, Belize, and Barbados are the only countries that have adopted the CCJ, which was established in 2001 as their court of appeal, as a court of last resort. Ms. St. Rose's call for change is not new. Now, this is the article. In 2011, the Constitutional Reform Commission, led by Justice Susie Dovey, addressed the issue. The commission rejected the notion that the region had not produced qualified jurists to perform on an appellate court. The commission rejected that notion, Madam President. The commission noted in its report that the Privy Council approved of many decisions by the Court of Appeal. The report recognized that the method of appointing judges to the CCJ was almost identical to the system employed by the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, and so this was a moot point. Said the Dovey report, the commission noted that with the exception of the selection of the Chief Justice of the CCJ, governments of the region played no role whatsoever in the appointment and selection of judges. The commission acknowledged that this was peculiar to the court and unique in the world. I wanted to just read that part of the report to emphasize that Honorable Philip J. Pierre does not decide who the head of the court is. And I am saying this, Madam President, because this was another question that continues to circulate in the public where people have concerns that there may be some political interference. But I will not delve further into that because I do believe Senator Lee did a fair job at explaining that to us. But Madam President, additionally, and I'm getting very close to the end, the commission was convinced that a commitment needed to be made to complete St. Lucia's growth as a civilization in its own right, and that the umbilical ties to the former colonial motherland needed to be broken. The commission regarded it as incompatible with the status of independence that the interpretation of St. Lucia's laws should be done for it by a foreign power on foreign soil. Madam President, I'm getting to the meat of the matter. The article ends. In a July 2018 interview with Jamaica Observer, 2018, who was in office, Prime Minister Alan Chasney said that although the CCJ was a critical issue, it was not a priority for his government. Although it was a critical issue, it was not a priority for his government. Turning around the economy and dealing with unemployment, Chasney said, consumed his government's time. Madam President, I finish. Earlier that week, Justice Minister Herman Gill Francis said there has been no formal discussion on this matter. However, it is his view that St. Lucia should adopt the Trinidad and Tobago-based courts. I am all for the CCJ, he said. Herman Gill Francis said when interviewed by Jamaican Observer, "I am all for the CCJ. I think our judges have demonstrated their ability to dispense justice. To go to the Privy Council takes too long and it's too expensive. With our own courts in the Caribbean, we'll be able to dispense justice more quickly," end quote. Francis said that early in 2020, Cabinet will solicit a collective decision on the way forward. Madam President, I read this because I want the people of St. Lucia to understand. And you know, I have to constantly refer to what senators before me said. When St. Lucians went to those polls, July 2026, you think they did not know what they were doing? 2021, you think they did not know what they were doing? They went to the polls, Madam President, after the SLP had presented its manifesto. Acceding to the CCJ was a manifesto promised by the St. Lucia Labour Party administration. The people of St. Lucia agreed to that by giving them the 15-2 majority, and that was the referendum. Madam President, if Alan Chasney, who was the Prime Minister at the time, and his Minister for Justice have agreed then that the CCJ was important, all of a sudden they have a problem with it. And we will understand why. When the Prime Minister spoke and gave his contribution to the debate, laying the budget estimates in 2020, and explained to St. Lucia that a CCJ committee will be put in place to engage in a consultative process. Do you know, Madam President, who the first person was that the CCJ committee met with? The first representative of the public that the CCJ met with was the leader of the opposition. They spent about 4 hours with the former Prime Minister, Alan Chasney, now leader of opposition. And guess what came out of that? Nothing concrete. Madam President, he had nothing to say when the committee came to him. He had nothing to say because it was not a priority for his government. But on Tuesday, he had an opportunity to lay his representation that the people of Mico South and his party UWP gave him. He had an opportunity to put it on record on Tuesday, but decided he was going to use another angle and speak to a different people. Madam President, today I notice you nodding on the opposite side. I noticed the Deputy President, when he sat in the chair temporarily, nodding on the other side. And I understand that respectfully you have to nod. But Madam President, we are nodding to empty chairs, Madam President. The opposition is not in the House. Madam President, you know what I think is so ridiculous about it? The opposition did not come to Parliament today. Held a press conference at 11 o'clock this morning and spent the entire press conference debating whether or not the Speaker should be the head of the lower house. Wow. Their press conference announced they would not be part of an undemocratic sitting. The Speaker is not presiding over the Senate, Madam President, and I think it is absolute disrespect to you.
That's right.
Instead, you have a stipend from the taxpayers' money. You come and represent and share your voice. You want to blindly follow your leader who walked out of the House on Tuesday, and you still have absolutely no excuse. Madam President, we are not debating the moralistic perception of what is going on. We are debating what the Constitution has told us. All of a sudden, 44 years later, the Constitution has an error. All of a sudden, 44 years later, the Constitution does not work for the UWP. The Constitution that was led by the founding father of the United Workers' Party, who we all have great respect for, Sir John Compton. The Constitution did not work for Honorable Stephenson King when he was Prime Minister. All of a a sudden the Constitution does not work for the leader of the opposition and the UWP 44 years later, using this time of independence, of celebration, where we as a people should be proud of how far we came. They want to talk about undemocratic house. Madam President, the undemocraticness of the UWP was when they prevented us from coming near Parliament to exercise our rights as an opposition at the time. Yellow tape. People feeling like they were going to be thrown in prison. I remember a particular situation with Dr. Zhe when she was advocating on the Black Lives Matter issue. They wanted to arrest her right in Constitution Park, Madam President. Lest we forget. But the Labour Party knew that the UWP was going to protest on Tuesday. What did we do? Nothing. We allowed the people to express themselves because this is what the Constitution of St. Lucia was founded upon. Our ability and our right, freedom of expression. But Madam President, if we had to use the numbers outside of the House on Tuesday as a referendum, Madam President, I would feel sorry for the United Workers' Party. Because the 12, 15 or 20 persons who were there, who were not sure as to why they were debating, Madam President, that was their referendum. Madam President, we continue to make a mockery of people. We have an opportunity to speak. We are abdicating our responsibilities because we want to put on show. And Madam President, I am only left to wonder if it's because the senators did not want for a possible division, for it to go on the record that they did not support St. Lucia moving to the CCJ. Madam President, I can tell you, there has been absolutely no reason, anything substantive enough to suggest that we do not create our own identity. I had this interview with Sir Dennis last night, and it was so mind-boggling to learn that only 12 countries still go to the CCJ, Madam President. 8 of those countries to the Privy Council, thank you, and 8 of those countries are from the region. The young people who were sitting in the gallery on Tuesday, the law students from the South Louis Community College, can they ever say, you know, your parents always tell you, you're going to become a prime minister one day, or the sky is the limit. Can they imagine themselves ever as being a justice in the Privy Council? With the millions of persons who are there, even way before them, with the inaccessibility of the courts, 130,000 on average to get your case heard. Madam President, do you know what the average cost of filing to the CCJ is? It is about 80 US. And anybody who has the facts or can challenge what I'm saying, please tell me. It is about 80 US. And further, Madam President, exceptions will be made for persons who cannot afford. Now tell me if that is not accessible justice. Tell me if that does not create an equal opportunity for our men and women to have an opportunity to be heard. These young people who were in the House on Tuesday, Madam President, can say maybe one day I can be a CCJ judge. We have an issue with our identity. It's as if we still have shackles, Madam President. And this move by Honorable Philip J. Pierre is yet another move to break those shackles. We are capable. And let me tell you, people can say what they want about Dr. Anthony, Madam President. He gave a fair explanation as to why we should not be part of the Privy Council because of its origin. Because of its colonial origin. And we have a problem with ourselves. We have a problem with our skin color. And when we ask the question, why not the CCJ, we cannot get an answer. When the PRO of the United Workers' Party was interviewed, he said he's not against the CCJ, but they just want a referendum. They just want a referendum. As if this is a joke. But Madam President, I know that my brothers and sisters are not foolish. The people are not foolish. We want St. Lucians to understand. Although there are 2 political parties in this country, you need to think for yourself. You need to understand this. You need to know where it is we as a people are going. And so, Madam President, I wanted to just touch on that because I know that many persons before me have explained in depth why it is that we need to go to the CCJ. And I want to take this opportunity to really commend our Prime Minister. He made a promise to us in the laying of his budget, Madam President. And before that budget, the next budget round is here, we are seeing that the St. Lucia Labour Party is delivering on its promise. Another promise you will see is that the launch of the Youth Economy Agency, that flagship campaign promise of the SLP, will be launched on Tuesday, March 7th. We are here to work for the people. And Madam President, come what may, by the hook or by the crook, the SLP will continue to use this manifesto as a guide because this is the promise and this is the premise that the people of St. Lucia voted us on. Madam President, I just wanted to quickly add my voice to this debate and say that I wholeheartedly, unreservedly support the amendment to the Constitution to allow for St. Lucia to accede to the CCJ.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I think my rebuttal is going to be a lot shorter than I thought, having had the benefit of the contributions that have gone just ahead of me, particularly the last two presenters. I think they have adequately addressed some of the issues that were raised before, and even some of those that are very current, like what happened this morning. Madam President, as I stand to provide this brief rebuttal, I want to make a point that I have made, and I don't know, as fate may have it, it is probably something that, if you go back and check the records, every single time I have stood to rebut in this Senate, I've had to say it. So there we go again. I stand to speak, to respond, or to rebut, and I look across the chamber, and the chair of the opposition, leader of opposition business, is again empty. Today, it is there's an extension. It is not only that his chair is empty, he now has company. The other two opposition members, again, empty chairs. So I'm not only making that observation today, Madam President, that the entire opposition has absented themselves, and I think, as was pointed out, there are certain procedures that guide the behavior of members of this chamber regarding their absence. I did not hear an excuse, and I trust your professionalism. I suppose if there was one, we would have heard it. So it would be very interesting to find out what went on today. It is very clear, based on what we have observed, where the members were. So I don't think anybody can say that they were sick, as I think happened previously. But I'll have to wait for that. Madam President, today was a great opportunity, a great opportunity indeed, for us as a country to come together, government, independent, and opposition, perhaps for once in the life of this parliament, to stand together and make a decision on behalf of the people of our country. And that decision is an amendment to our highest law of the land, the Constitution, given what it means to us. A time when we would have made a decision regarding our fundamental rights and freedoms. And there is nothing more powerful, more meaningful, more succinct to an independent nation, to a civilization, than honoring the expectations and the requirements of its constitution. But sadly, this is what we have. I want to put on record my commendation and my appreciation for our Honorable Prime Minister, who had the courage to bring to fruition a process that started many years ago. And I'm indeed grateful to be part of this government that can look back and see that we got this done. I want to thank Senator Lee for his lesson, his good bringing his legal background to bear on this discussion. And I think it speaks to the dynamism of the Senate. We have people of various strengths and competencies, and I think today it was good to have had the views and sharings of a legal mind and a student of the Constitution, really, to provide us with that perspective. Now, as we know it, Senator Lee is tends to be very pointed in his arguments, and sometimes he makes certain points and throws certain things at us that we have to stand up and take like men and women. And there are times that it gives us an opportunity to respond and to clarify. And there are two things that I just wanted to touch on that were raised by Senator Lee. He made a point where he basically compared the actions of the opposition today to that of a once upon a time Labour Party opposition in the days in the 1979, 78, 79 era. I just want to clarify, Madam President, that it was actually not a very accurate comparison, because the circumstances were completely different then. And we were obedient to the Constitution, because I'm standing here representing a government that is led by the St. Lucia Labour Party. And I will, at every opportunity, defend anything that does not accurately represent what the Labour Party's philosophy stands for. And so I say to our independent senator that in those days, the Constitution was expected that if we did not have the majority of 2/3, that there had to be a referendum. And back then, there was no 2/3 majority. And that's probably why the Labour Party, obedient to the Constitution, was insisting that we had to have a referendum. So, again, very consistent and very true to the Constitution. And this is exactly what we're saying today. We are still obedient to the Constitution, and we are making the decision because the Constitution gives us that privilege. He also made a very interesting point, and this time I think I want to agree and comment on it, that there is need for education. That's probably a consequence of what we see. People are just following, they are just getting involved in actions, marches, protests, without a clear understanding of what exactly the issue is. And even those who may support the move may still require some kind of sensitization and education. And again, sometimes, when he's so right, I just have to agree and, say yes, he is. I want to say, in addition to that, that our government, this government, had made a very strong commitment to this country that in our curriculum, in our school curriculum, we vowed or we promised to introduce Caribbean history and St. Lucian history as part of our school curriculum. Now, that decision is not based on just any far-fetched pie-in-the-sky idea. That is based on a fundamental principle that your identity as a person is really seriously affected by your history. And that growing up as a child in school, even at primary school and pre-secondary, we hardly really had any history taught. The little bit of social studies we learned did not equip the average child with enough background on their community, their country, and themselves. In fact, no Caribbean history is taught before secondary school in this country. And even when we did history in secondary school, what history were we learning? Caribbean history just came in recently. We were learning a lot of other things that were not necessarily relevant to our own existence. And so I want to, in response to that point, say to Senator Lee and the rest of us that one of the ways in which we can solve that problem of our people not being properly educated, and I'm looking at even the formal education system, is to insert the Caribbean history, the St. Lucian history, the history of our country into the curriculum, so that a child from age 5, once they can begin to read, for the first 7 years of their education, would have been immersed in that and understand a lesson like what Dr. Anthony provided. Every child in St. Lucia by age 12 should have had that information and be empowered with that. So they would understand the relevance of what we're doing. And further, when they get through secondary education, by the time a child graduates from a secondary school in St. Lucia, they should be able to understand the history of their country and the history of their region, so that they would better understand themselves, who they are, what that represents. And I think today I can stand and support this because I was not a student of history, formal student of history at school, but I think I have developed a consciousness as a St. Lucian, understanding where I came from, understanding what makes me me. I think I'm a nice blend of a Caribbean man. I don't say these things in public, but my paternal lines are actually French Caribbean, and my maternal lines are actually St. Lucian. So I think I'm a good blend of what the Caribbean offers, and most of us in this country can speak to having some connection in some other part of the region. That makes you a real Caribbean person, and I don't see it as a deficiency. I see it as a strength, because there are certain things we appreciate about ourselves because we understand what makes us who we are. And I think that is the essence of the argument about education. So, Madam President, I thank the Senator for that contribution, and I hope that his observations, again, are on point and, really brought this to bear. Senator, my other colleague, Senator Aziz, raised a very interesting argument. He was brief, but I thought he was also very much on point when he offered the suggestion that we have to look at the rest of our justice system. Very true. Sad, we don't always want to face it, but I think we're looking at justice. We can't look at it in a vacuum and say that we want justice at a certain level, but we're ignoring the need for justice at every other level. The Magistrate Court, the High Court, the Court of Appeal, the CCJ. At every level, the justice system must work. And that what happens at the CCJ needs to complement what's going on at the other levels. I thought that was, for me, very critical. And that commitment has been given through the discussions that the Prime Minister and the Minister for Home Affairs also addressed in their presentation. Now, Madam President, I want to wrap up. But before I do, I think it is only fair that we address the issue of the attack on our regional institutions, on our regional intellectuals. We cannot sit or stand in this chamber as St. Lucians and allow for it to appear that people have attacked our institutions. And I think the opposition couldn't come here today and do it again, because they have already tasted the response of St. Lucians to that type of approach. And so today they absented themselves. But I'm very proud to say that it is in 2023, in a St. Lucia Labour Party government's reign, that the opposition can feel so empowered, so liberated, so safe, that they can come outside and come next to the House of Parliament and chant all kinds of things, no, whatever, CCZ, referendum, whatever. Say whatever they want. This is the essence of democracy, Madam President, and this is what we represent. We have no problem with that. The only issues we have problems with is whether the people who are doing this understand what they're doing. And that takes me back to the education Senator Lee talked about. Do they understand exactly what they're doing? But I think it is very, very fitting that I can stand here today and speak about protest action, demonstration, march, whatever you want to call it, happening when a St. Lucia Labour Party government allows and respects the right of every St. Lucian in yellow, red, blue, and green to exercise it. So, the opposition today, I think they spend the entire day doing that. That's their prerogative, that's their right. So, Madam President, I want to say that we have seen a pattern of behavior, and it does not only occur, or it has not only occurred in response to this particular piece of legislation. Anytime the opposition is not in agreement with either a decision, a statement, opposition taken by the government, I don't think they have recognized how much leeway and opportunity there is to voice it. We were in opposition a few years ago, and there are lots of things we disagreed with. But there was always a way to express it in a civil, democratic, respectful way. You don't have to take it to that level sometimes to show your disagreement. Show it. But in doing so, you don't have to take people down with you. And so, Madam President, I think it is in poor taste when, we have independence celebrations and the opposition does not attend. And even to make it worse, the excuses given, admitting that you were invited, admitting that you designated people to attend, they do not attend, and they don't even provide an explanation. I don't know how that can then make you a moral authority on process and procedure. I don't know. So, Madam President, there's inconsistency in what the opposition says and what it does, and that's nothing new. Now, we have gotten an ideological, practical, financial, social, and even a socioeconomic arguments about the ascension to the CCJ as our final court of appeal. And all of these arguments really are saying one thing, that the access to justice is a benefit to everybody, and it's a right of every citizen. And it goes back to the fundamental principles of the Constitution, that everybody's fundamental rights and freedoms should be respected and should be facilitated. And I think that is what we're here to achieve. Madam President, we've heard that some of the countries like Jamaica, Trinidad, the big fish, the only reason they have not done likewise is because they have not had the mandate of the 3/4 or the 2/3. I'm sure if they had, they would have already, and as soon as they get that opportunity, they will. So I offer them some advice, and I offer them to reach out to the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Philip Joseph Pierre. He'll show them how to win elections with that kind of mandate, so that, what's our good friend's name from Trinidad? Mr. Rowley and Mr. Holness and company. Yes, you're talking about regional prowess, people who know what they're doing. Yeah, we have to be very proud of the achievement of our Prime Minister and our country. They might want to give him a call and say to him, how do you get the opposition to come and join you and be an alliance with you and win elections and be in the best interest of the people of this country? The master strokes that they spoke about. Yes, because these things are not just political. These are people who know how to bring people together. Who would have thought that the man who stood up after the passing of Sir John, alone for the United Workers' Party, all alone, when everybody went to hide, is now sitting in the cabinet of the St. Lucia Labour Party? That is a signal of confidence and patriotism, respect for what is right. And this is what our Prime Minister represents. And that is why he has the courage in his slim, dark, tall self, humble self. And he can stutter it, he can say it in any way, that he has the courage to be able to come to this house and make that move on behalf of the people of this country. So, Madam President, I want to finally say that the opposition, we like to say that they're making noise, but we must not take these things lightly. I am now asking the question, after all that has happened between Tuesday and today, this referendum that I think Senator Shalry took some time to explain it in both Creole and in English. I am now beginning to wonder, Madam President, this referendum thing is really about what? Is it really about going back to the people of St. Lucia to find out whether they want the CCJ? Or is the leader of the opposition trying to get a referendum on himself to find out whether he is still relevant in his own party? And if so, if what I saw outside there on Tuesday that Senator Jawahir described is the result of that referendum, I think he may have to follow Honorable Stephenson King. The only problem is that I do not know whether my Prime Minister will accede to that. So I am seriously, Madam President, on a very serious note, wondering if what is going on these days on that referendum has anything to do with the CCJ, or whether it has more to do with somebody who is struggling to lead his organization, trying to get a referendum on himself to know whether he should still remain. That question will be answered at some point. But I want to say at this point, Madam President, that the people of this country have given us the mandate to do something on behalf of this country. And I think it is our duty to do so, and I am happy that we have come to deliver. After listening to what Senator Jawahir said regarding the former Minister of National Security, I take a lot more comfort in understanding that there are people within the ranks of the opposition who cannot take their word back and have made it clear that they do support the CCJ. That gives me some more comfort. And so I probably would call upon him, he's my good friend, and ask him to, perhaps he needs to give his leader a call and say, look, stop putting pressure on me, because I also had stated that I support the CCJ. Madam President, I thank members for their contributions. I once again assure St. Lucians that this Labour Party government will continue to represent their interests, continue to come to this House to pass legislation, amend legislation, and make decisions that will better represent their interests and make our country a stronger and greater nation. I thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that the Constitution of St. Lucia Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Constitution of St. Lucia, Cap 1.01. Whereas under Section 41(1) of the Constitution of St. Lucia, Cap 1.01, Parliament may alter any of the provisions of the Constitution. And whereas under Section 41(2) of the Constitution of St. Lucia, Cap 1.01, a bill to alter Section 41, Section 1 to the Constitution, or any of the provisions of the Constitution specified in Part 1 of that schedule shall not be regarded as being passed by the House unless its final reading in the House, the bill, is supported by the votes of not less than 3/4 of all the members of the House. And whereas the provisions of the Constitution of St. Lucia, Cap 1.01, are being altered by this Act.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 3.
Amendment of Section 16.
Clause 3 forms part of the bill. Aye. Clause 4.
Amendment of Section 18.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 5.
Amendment of Section 41.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 6.
Amendment of Section 73.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 7.
Amendment of Section 106.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 8.
Substitution of Section 108.
Clause 8 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 9.
Insertion of new Section 108A.
Clause 9 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 10.
Amendment of Section 124.
Clause 10 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Aye. Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. Sorry. Senators, I beg to report that the Constitution of St. Lucia Senators, I beg to report that the Constitution of St. Lucia Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg that the report of the committee be adopted and that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Constitution of St. Lucia Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This Act may be cited as the Constitution of St. Lucia Amendment Act, 2023.
Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism, Investment and Creative Industries, Culture and Information, and Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled Money Laundering Prevention Amendment.
Money Laundering Prevention Amendment.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to allow this bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that the Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Please proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I'd like to present for second reading the bill shortly entitled Money Laundering Prevention Amendment. Madam President, the bill here for consideration, the Money Laundering Prevention Amendment Bill. The purpose of this, the amendment here, is aimed at to amend the Money Laundering Prevention Act Cap 12.20, the Act. Clauses 1 and 2 of the bill provide for the short title and interpretation respectively. Section 2 of the Act, the interpretation, is amended by Clause 3 of the bill to substitute the definition of the term beneficial owner and to introduce new definitions for close associate and virtual asset business. Clause 4 of the bill, the penalty under Section 6B of the Act, penalty for failure to comply with direction for financial institutions or persons engaged in other businesses or business activities. Failure to comply with a direction is increased to $100,000. So that's another clause changed. Under Section 14H, the Act, penalty is amended by Clause 5 of the bill to increase the $100,000 penalty for the licensed financial institutions' non-compliance with specific sections of the Act. Additionally, Clause 6 of the bill amends Section 15 of the Act, the customer identity, and there to provide the threshold for establishing customer identity for specified transactions, and that is at 10,000 United States dollars, which is equivalent to 27 or so thousand Eastern Caribbean dollars, instead of the previous 8,000 US. And to substitute the definition of applicant for business. Section 16(1) of the Act, responsibility of financial institutions or persons engaged in other businesses activity or other business activities, is amended by Clause 7 of the bill to provide that a financial institution or person engaged in other business activity must report to a financial intelligence authority, which is the authority, a transaction or attempted transaction considered to be suspicious relating to terrorist financing, proliferation financing, and so on. In addition, Madam President, Clause 8 of the bill, Section 17(1) of the Act, the customer due diligence section. This is amended to require the conduct of customer diligence with respect to virtual assets business and carries out specified financial transactions. Under Section 18 of the Act, referring to politically exposed persons, those of us in here, Madam President, and others, it is substituted by Clause 9 of the bill to provide additional measures that a financial institution or person engages in other business activity must undertake with respect to politically exposed persons. Clause 10 of the bill substitutes Section 28 of the Act, concealing or transferring proceeds of criminal conduct. Very interesting one there, Madam President. This is to clarify that a person may not handle property representing his or her criminal conduct or criminal conduct in general. By Clause 11 of the bill, Section 34 of the Act, mutual assistance. This one is amended by substituting subsection 2 to expand the areas under which the authority provides mutual legal assistance to include terrorist financing and proliferation financing. And a new section is added, Section 41, inserted by Clause 12 of the bill to exempt the authority from payment of duties, taxes, and levies. And Schedule 12 of the Act is amended by Part A, by Clause 13 of the bill to remove an entity licensed under International Mutual Funds Act Cap 1216, from the scope of application of the Act and to include new financial institutions which apply, which the Act applies. Now, Madam President, These amendments are necessary basically for us to be able to comply to some of the expectations that and commitments that we've made to international financial services. And they would include such services as SWIFT banking systems, correspondence banking, transfers, wiring money, and other legitimate business transactions. Some of the measures relate to something that is very prevalent now in our business environment, which is virtual business and virtual business asset or virtual asset businesses. These measures sometimes, Madam President, become necessary because of the kind of environment that we operate in. Although we're small, but sometimes we have to almost comply to things that we are not responsible for, just like climate change. When you have things like terrorist financing, St. Lucia, terrorist financing. But we're part of a global environment, and so the same way we have to be held accountable for climate change is the same way we have to comply to some of the expectations that we may not be necessarily the biggest culprits in. Madam President, St. Lucia being a member of the Financial Action Task Force, we have these agreements and we have to fulfill these expectations. And so some avenues have been provided for, we would like to know that some avenues have been provided for us not to be discriminated against in terms of these expectations. And so I ask that we allow this piece of legislation, these amendments to be made to satisfy these expectations through this Senate. Thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that the Money Laundering Prevention Amendment Bill be read a second time. Senator Jean.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Just very, very briefly, I lend my support to the amendment to the Money Laundering Prevention Amendment Bill on the basis that I see it as a safeguard to our citizens who are trying to do business with financial institutions, because I recognize that that bill does not only deal with banks, but deals with all financial institutions and ensures that there is proper licensing of these financial institutions. In the world that we live in today, we're subject to a lot of positive, but there are also some unscrupulous people who would be trying to get into the financial services sector for some unsavory reasons. And so we want to ensure that our citizens have that safeguard that when they invest money or when they seek loans from some of these institutions, that their interest is guarded. The other aspect I'm seeing why this bill is necessary is connected with our Citizen by Investment program, because you have a number of persons from outside who are not native citizens, but we are inviting other people to become citizens of our country. And although I believe the level of due diligence is quite robust, but we must still ensure that we do not have anyone who slip through the cracks. And it's a form of de-risking our CIP program. All I ask, Madam President, is that in the process, these amendments do not make our financial institutions' processes more onerous than they are now for our citizens. Because it's so very difficult now for us to do business, do financial transactions. What I find very strange is some of these requirements are brought to bear on us by the international agencies. But there are some countries, for example, in the United States, you could walk into a bank in the middle of Manhattan and open a bank account with just your passport or your ID. But in St. Lucia, in our country, you are required to present how many IDs, how many utility bills. You have to say who your nenen is, your power, your everybody. And still after that, the account must remain for a period of time, I suppose, to be scrutinized by several other agencies before you can get that account opened. So we're subject to the vagaries of the international environment, and so in order for us to be compliant and to ensure that we are not seen as any country that is harboring terrorism and otherwise, we would have to put in these measures. So I stand in support of the amendment and trust that it helps our financial sector to have less risk. Thank you.
Leader of Government Business. Senators, the question is that the Money Laundering Prevention Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Money Laundering Prevention Act, Cap 12.20.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 3.
Amendment of Section 2.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 4.
Amendment of Section 6B.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 5.
Amendment of Section 14H.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 6.
Amendment of Section 15.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 7.
Amendment of Section 16.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 8.
Amendment of Section 17.
Clause 8 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 9.
Substitution of Section 18.
Clause 9 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 10.
Amendment of Section 28.
Clause 10 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 11.
Amendment of Section 34.
Clause 11 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 12.
Insertion of new Section 41.
Clause 12 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 13.
Amendment of Schedule 2.
Clause 13 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are that of opinion say aye.
Aye.
As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Money Laundering Prevention Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and the Money Laundering Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This Act may be cited as the Money Laundering Prevention Amendment Act, 2023.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg for present the first reading of a bill shortly entitled Money Services Business Amendment.
Money Services Business Amendment.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to allow this bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Please proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move for the second reading of a bill shortly entitled Money Services Business Amendment. Madam President, very similar to the previous bill, this bill is intended to allow us these amendments to, again, fulfill our commitments and our obligations to the financial services, regulations. Madam President, in the case of this bill, it is more specific to agencies that engage in borrowing, in lending, soft loans, small loans. We call them pay lenders or payday lenders that our citizens run to, for quick cash to be able to take care of some of their immediate needs. While we agree that they are necessary in some cases, or it may seem so, we have to, one of the things I would want to mention is that they serve a certain section of the population that may not require large sums of money. And we're talking about some of those institutions that are not banks. Some of them are not even credit unions. Now we have some local business places making that part of their offerings. There's a little bit of advice that I think we could offer to our regular St. Lucians who may be tempted to access these services. And of course, that's interest rate. They're short term, but the interest rates are extremely high. And I think we need to guide our people so that they pay attention to the kinds of commitments they were getting into when they engage those institutions. Yes, they are short term, but I think sometimes you have to watch the steps you take in making commitments and these decisions. There are times it may be better to be a little more patient and to put in perhaps a long-term payment plan. In the Creole palace, they used to say, "Mokamete salikol." In other words, it's almost like a hire purchase arrangement when you need to purchase stuff, rather than go taking a loan of $5,000 and the interest rate is almost 1/3 of the amount to be paid back in 6 months, and then put yourself in further debt. So while we believe that it is important for those facilities to be available to persons on a short term, it's not something that we would want St. Lucians, especially persons who don't have a stable income, to just run for and incur debt upon themselves. I think we need to encourage our citizenry to be responsible and to monitor some of the conditions that these lending agencies offer. But I think this piece of legislation is really ensuring that they are in compliance with some of the business transactional principles and processes that are required. And so I think it is important for us to amend and allow for this piece of legislation to do so. In this case, the bill amends Section 40 of the Money Services Business Bill to allow for licensing and regulating of the operations of these businesses. I think this is one of the crucial ones that needed to be pointed out. And so I urge the Senate to approve of these amendments.
Senators, the question is that the Money Services Business Amendment Bill be read a second time. Leader of Government Business.
Well, Madam President, the silence suggests that our colleagues are in full support. Perhaps that they saw no need to elaborate because it's self-explanatory. So I ask for the approval of the Senate.
Senators, the question is that the Money Services Business Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Money Services Bill Act, Cap 12.22.
Clause 2.
Amendment of Section 40.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Aye. Honorable members, the question, I beg your pardon, senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Money Services Business Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Money Services Business Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's most excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This Act may be cited as the Money Services Business Amendment Act 2023.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move for the first reading of a bill shortly entitled Fisheries Management.
Fisheries Amendment.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at the city.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism, Investment and Creative Industries, Culture and Information, and Leader of Government Business with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Please proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. I move for the second reading of a bill shortly entitled Fisheries Amendment. Madam President, this amendment will find a lot of, will be welcomed to a large extent in specific communities, particularly on the west coast of St. Lucia, namely Soufrière and Ancillary. And there are reasons for that, because some background to that really comes out of some of the information coming from the Soufrière Marine Management Association, known as the SMMA, which was established in 1994. And really, as the years went by, in 1995, they designed this act, and the local Fisheries Management Authority and the SMMA, they have really tried to improve on their operations. The areas include fishing, scuba diving, snorkeling, yachting moorings, and other approved activities. So they've really done quite a lot of work over the years. However, there has been a lack of legislative cover, which has resulted in the inability of the association to enforce protection and conservation measures within the designated area to collect association fees for the services that are related, and these services that I mentioned: snorkeling, swimming, dive permits, yacht moorings. And as we know, these organizations are set up not only to protect the environment, but also to be able to, as we call it, be self-sufficient, to be able to generate their own income, to be able to sustain themselves so that they don't become a burden on the government itself. So this legislative cover really, and in the form of this proposed amendment to the Fisheries Act, intends to remedy that situation and bring some measure of normalcy to the operations of the SMMA. And now it is being strongly aligned with the role that they have and their legal authority. The bill makes provision, firstly, for the amendment to allow the Minister for Agriculture, that is, to designate a local marine cooperative or association, and then further allow for the designated Marine Management Authority, the SMMA, to make its bylaws and to conduct and regulate its own affairs. And I think that is a way to empower the people who run these organizations. I think we have in the Senate someone who is a member of a cooperative and understands how those things work, and how it is important that you can manage your own affairs and you can manage your own services. And therefore, Madam President, the amendment we are seeking to make here would allow the Minister to proceed with the designation of the SMMA as a marine management authority and would contribute towards resolving long-standing issues and challenges by users regarding the SMMA's authority to collect user fees and to regulate the activities within its boundaries. If you do not have any regulating authority, if you don't have any structure, then you can't really manage, especially when people are reluctant to pay for the services and to pay for the things they have to do. In addition, there have been breaches to the bylaws, and these breaches would now be constituted as offenses, and there could be some conviction and some kind of sanction in relation to these offenses, and the amounts are also stated not exceeding $10,000, so persons can be charged for being in breach of these bylaws. And so it is the objective of this bill to deter illegal and unsavory activities within the boundaries of the SMMA and to allow for future enjoyment of the resources by all. So we see that this is a step towards regulating the authorities that take charge of these resources, and we hope that this can bring some kind of structure and regulation to the operations of the SMMA.
Senators, the question is that the Fisheries Amendment Bill be read a second time. Senator Shalry.
Thank you, Madam President. Forgive me, I'm so cold, practically shivering. So forgive me if perhaps I don't come through too strongly. But Madam President, I just want to stand very briefly to lend my support to the amendment of the Fisheries Act. I think the move to begin the amendments and the updates of the Fisheries Act, as we have seen in the last 18 months of this administration, is very progressive. And understanding as well the importance that the fishing sector has to not just the economy of this country, but to individual households. I think it's important that we make this piece of legislation more current and more relative. And so I support this amendment. I think there is greater need, Madam President, to manage the resources that lend itself to the health of the fishery. And when we talk about the importance of these designated areas, we have the SMMA that covers soufre and canneries and ancillary marine management areas. We have the PACIPA, which is a point sub environmental protected area, which covers from the Makote mangrove down towards the south. And it is important that there are organizations, one, that look towards ensuring that these areas are protected so that there is a great level of preservation of the rich resources that are found in these areas. After all, they were designated marine protected areas for a reason. We understand that the mangroves are what feed practically the rest of the fishing community, because that is where the habitat is rich, and so it ensures that the fishermen of this country have a good supply of fish. And so there is need to ensure that we protect it, to ensure that we protect the coral and the reefs and so on there. And so I believe that it is a step in the right direction to give greater effort to the organizations that are charged with that responsibility, but not just not just that, but the ability to be as autonomous as possible so that they are able to live up to the mandate for which they are established in the first place. Madam President, again, this amendment follows through with the mandate of this party to empower people at the local level to ensure that there is a decentralization of the services that we can lend to our country. And it follows what has begun to happen within, well, with oversight of the Department of Fisheries. Only last year we saw a memorandum of understanding being signed between the Goodwill Fishermen's Cooperative and the Ministry responsible for fisheries under the jurisdiction of the Department of Fisheries for oversight of the landing site at Savans Bay. And I know that it is one of many memorandum of understanding between the local cooperatives within the fishing communities, because I know there was one that was scheduled, I think it was for Soufre, that has not gotten underway. And so it is really about giving a high level of empowerment to persons at the local level who know and understand what happens in their own locality, the ability to manage and the ability to make decisions on behalf of the persons whom they represent. And again, reiterating the importance of ensuring that we protect these areas so as to protect the fishing sector and by extension the food security of this country. And if we go back a few years, Madam President, and we remember the DSH debacle and where the Makote mangrove at one point was caught between that debacle, where we came to understand that that piece of important protected area would have formed part of the DSH project. And it was very concerning to us in the fishing sector. And I remember the concerned citizens of Viewford, it was one of the areas that they took up, because we understood too well what it would mean, how detrimental it would have been to the fishing sector if in fact that area was left to be desecrated by that kind of development, Madam President. And so it meant that if perhaps there was a proper authority or authority with that type of teeth that is being given to the SMMA to have looked at the interest of the fishing sector when that debacle was on the table, that it would have given it even greater credence. And so for these reasons, Madam President, I lend my support to the amendment, and I look forward to greater things to come for the fishing sector. I look forward to a decisive decision being made, for example, with the issue of the St. Lucia Fish Marketing Corporation, for example, to again give a greater level of value and respect to the importance of the fishing sector to our island and to especially the rural communities in our country. And so for these reasons, I support the amendment, Madam President. I thank you.
Senator Aziz.
Madam President, thank you very much. Just a few words I'd like to share on this bill that's coming through the upper house. I'm all in favor of empowerment and supporting local or community-based organizations, especially in this day and age, those who are concerned with the blue economy. And I absolutely submit to the argument that based on the ground and within these communities, they are in sync with the pulse of these communities and the needs of these communities. And the empowerment given to them through evolving legislation is important to the overall socioeconomic ecosystem within these communities. But I do submit that empowerment must be balanced with accountability and transparency at the end of the day. This legislation, these amendments, as it relates to giving, as it says here, without limiting the generality of subsection 1, the bylaws may provide for fees or charges to be fixed for the carrying out of services by the Marine Management Authority. Now, very often there is a mix of multiple stakeholders involved in the coordination of these efforts and the functioning of these entities. Is there full and transparent stakeholder consultation and engagement to inform the evolution of the legislation? And when it comes to the decision, the authority that these institutions will now have to raise fines or to introduce charges for services, it is critical that as part of that divestment of authority, if you will, that there is full and transparent engagement with stakeholders before these fees are imposed. Because we have seen in recent past, in recent history, the mismanagement of these entities, of these organizations, creates a lot of distrust among stakeholders at the end of the day. And when I speak of mismanagement, I'm not only speaking about the mismanagement of financial resources, but the inability to honor the audited and presentation of audited financial statements, the inability to hold annual general meetings among stakeholders so that there is full discussion and guidance on how you progress from year to year, the transparency on how these funds are used at the end of the day. If an institution has a charge for conducting research within a marine ecosystem, for example, if it is charged with the responsibility of educating citizens on the value of these marine ecosystems to food security, is this being done with the money that is being collected? And if not, they need to be held accountable for mismanaging that expectation or those responsibilities. So I also want to just add that when it comes to the conduct of affairs in our country now, we are seeing a greater call from civil society to become involved in nation building and to honor their obligations to the development of our country. We're seeing greater and greater disinterest in just leaving everything up to government to solve all the problems. The private sector now, increasingly so, understands its corporate social responsibility in getting involved in the discussions, in crafting legislation, in crafting policy, in supporting development of green, blue, orange type economies, because we understand that we are all in this thing together and no group can shirk its responsibility. So in the interest of moving forward, as much as legislation must evolve and community-based organizations must be empowered, we have to understand that that comes with an obligation to show a very transparent slate and to honor the responsibilities that are entrusted in you. If not, then they need to be held accountable to stakeholders if they misuse the powers vested to them in legislation such as this. Thank you.
Senator Lee.
Thank you, Madam President. I wish to associate with the comments made by my colleague, independent senator. You know I'm very big on transparency, so I very much support the comments he made. I have one concern, though, and perhaps the legislative drafter can assist us just to make sure that I'm not running off course. The subsection 2B, which creates the power for, B1 provides for the creation of bylaws, and then 2 goes on to point out what the bylaws can provide for. I'm a little concerned that it's providing that the bylaws can provide that a breach of the bylaws constitutes an offense, and that the bylaws can create penalties. I'm not sure that this is delegated power that can be done in this sort of way, because it means basically we are handing off to some entity that we don't know yet what the entity is. We don't know how it's going to be structured. We don't know what the bylaws are going to provide for, but yet we are providing that penalties and offenses can be created under the bylaws by this institution that's not a government minister or a member of the legislature. So I do have some concern as to the full legality of that section. I admit that I've not studied it properly, but I have a concern there.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. The concerns raised by the independent senators very legitimate, and some of those authorities, as we call them, those statutory organizations that are given that responsibility. There is, let's say, in the forefront of my mind, a suggestion that has come up to address some of those, and we took that from the Tourism Development Act that will be coming very soon, to really consolidate all the other pieces of legislation that guide the tourism industry. And that is, in addition to the legislation, that is what we have here, we believe that there is need to have regulations. The regulations are going to be basically what guides operations. And these regulations should also be based on the principles that are established in the legislation. And that is something that I remember myself and Dr. Healy had a very strong discussion with the drafting people and other agencies when we, in the process of putting together the Tourism Development Act. So I think that same principle can be applied. And I think the legitimate issues that were raised there, to some extent, I think can be addressed by including regulations in addition to that. So I'm not the Minister for Agriculture, but I think, we see each other every week. And I think that these are some of the things that can be done to remedy some of these concerns. Essentially, Madam President, I just want to reiterate the importance of finding a balance between environmental, climate change, as we call it, food security, and tourism. Right now, these are three of the main issues that you will hear on the global stage, particularly when we look at countries and small economies like ours that are heavily dependent on agriculture and tourism. We have to find a balance between our food security and our environment. And this piece of legislation, what it also does is that it seeks to find that balance. While you ensure that the fishers have a means or way that can regulate what they do, you also have to protect the environment, the marine environment, the mangroves, as my colleague mentioned. And as we noted in the notes, you have touristic activities taking place in the same area. You have yachting, diving, snorkeling. People, they want to see the coral reefs. And coming out of being someone who works within the tourism sector, I am very sensitive to these things and how, I'm no tourism guru, but I'm very sensitive to the interactions that take place between the tourism sector and the environment as well as the agricultural sector. And no one sector should really be pushed at the expense of another. I think that piece of legislation recognizes the need to have a kind of balance between what the fishermen are doing and what others are doing within that same environment to benefit. And so I think it seeks to protect the interest of all. But I thought those observations were in place, and that the regulations could probably be developed to help to ensure that we achieve what the independent senators were referring to. So I thank them for these observations. And of course, this is a step in the direction that we want to take in terms of this government's commitment to really paying attention to the agricultural sector, the food security sector, as well as boosting the industry that brings almost the larger part of our foreign exchange, which is tourism. Thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that the Fisheries Amendment Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Fisheries Act, Cap 7.15.
Clause 2.
Insertion of new sections 22A and 22B.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Honorable members, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Fisheries Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, having acknowledged that, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Fisheries Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This Act may be cited as the Fisheries Amendment Act 2023.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that this Senate do stand adjourned, sine die.
Senators, the question is that this House do stand adjourned sine die. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting is adjourned.
All rise.
Well, the Senate has adjourned for today, and during today's sitting, we heard and saw the following bills go through the entire stages: the Money Laundering Prevention Amendment, the Money Services Business Amendment, and the Fisheries Amendment. And the big one, the Constitution Amendment for the CCJ, going through all the stages in this upper house. Justice is said to be ethical, philosophical, that people are to be treated impartially, fairly, properly, and personally by the law, and by arbiters of the law, that laws are to ensure that no harm befalls another, and that where harm is alleged, a remedial action is taken. Both the accuser and the accused receive. Justice is fairness in the way people are treated. The Caribbean Court of Justice is committed to providing accessible, fair, and efficient justice for the people and states of the Caribbean community. Today, we concluded the process for the accession to the Caribbean Court of Justice as St. Lucia's final appellate court and as the replacement to the Privy Council. The Opposition United Workers' Party had the opportunity to make their case again and again to the Parliament and the people of St. Lucia, but was pusillanimous, poor-spirited, and gutless by their total absence during the debate on this important legislation. The author, Octavia Butler, says, and I quote, "You should choose your leaders with wisdom and forethought. To be led by cowards is to be controlled by all the cowards' fear. To be led by fools is to be led by the opportunists who control the fools. To be led by a liar is to be asked to be told lies. To be led by a tyrant is to sell yourself and those you love into slavery." Michael Gaspar.
Merci Winston. Eh bien, aujourd'hui, nous venons au bout de la session Sénat là, qui tient après qu'il constitue une session mardi. Sénat là, comme normal, quand tient ça, souvent mardi, jeudi après, avec, mais aujourd'hui, ça qui est intéressant, c'est qui face à l'opposition pas décidé qui il pas de présent en disant qu'il constitue en décision qui était très important, en décision qui en loi qui bien important en la vie en Saint-Lucien côté gouvernement changé. Ça c'est dernier appel l'audience pour Saint-Lucien qui est sorti en Angleterre avec resté en Caraïbes là même ça il a créé CCJ. C'est ça qui était plus gros décision qui était faite avec quand il était fait en cas concept mardi. Et aussi j'ai tenu pour discuter ici avec comme on dit face à l'opposition en cas concept décidé il pas de présent avec ça intéressant tout bonnement mais quand même il passait avec toutes les autres membres face à la tenue 8 ça c'est 5 à surface c'est 7 c'est 5 à surface d'un gouvernement avec des indépendants qui étaient présents avec parler bien sérieux et en faveur de décision ça là aussi la tenue association il a créé monitoring ça Adam peut l'argent sale et bien l'argent qui pas légal pour empêcher ça tenue en loi qui passe sur ça avec aussi service l'argent pour business avec faire un changement en loi ça là aussi avec aussi pour la pêche la tenir en loi sur la pêche pour aider les pêcheurs pour joindre primaire service toujours c'est comme ça nous venons au bout de session aujourd'hui car oui monsieur Winston vous avez toujours une petit morceau même quand Shakespeare Sherlock merci un peu Winston avec ma Sony en dernière parole pour Winston. Ok, et puis ça nous venons au bout de session et nous avons dit merci un peu tout le monde qui écoutait et nous avons vu passer pour studio nous en NTM.